Hey Robert, how's it going, man?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Welcome to the group. It's just me and you right now, so
Okay. Is that a group?
I'm not sure, but as long as people show up, I'll keep coming. So works for me. How did your interview with the paper go?
Oh, wait, let me switch my video. See if that works. Yeah, it works. Uh, I guess it went all right. It's, I when I do a presentation, it's much easier because you wrote you have a story from the beginning to the end, but a reporter will just start asking questions in the middle. So so the
Right.
startup the startup was a little bit hard. So in the end, I just answered. I said, okay, you know what? Let me just tell you the story how I got to this to this project and where I am now. So they said, oh yeah, sure, go ahead. So she recorded everything, asked lots of questions because at some point it gets too technical for well, I guess for anyone that has never even heard, I figured that internet is so common for all of us. We use it every day. We don't really think about it anymore. And then if you tell somebody, well, the new internet has, it has nodes and you need to purchase some TFT, which is crypto, which is a bad word for a lot of people already, because there's so much bad news. So, they want to, but then you can see them looking like, oh God, I've got so much to do now. I also have to get into this. So,
Yeah,
but
no, it's definitely daunting, and I think a lot of that comes from not just it being complicated for this, but also people not having the understanding of how the internet works, even the current internet, because truly the internet we have now is the same way, because the data centers that make up all of the transmission joints are just the nodes and all of that. It's just that they're all controlled by, centralized companies.
yeah, yeah.
So it's done for us, I guess, would be makes it a little easier.
Yeah, and I guess some of us came to the conclusion recently, like you, me, Thijs, that we can actually, we may need to be the bridge between, let's call it the TFT and the fiat money. We can be the providers, we can be the web hosting company and just collect fiat money and transfer it to TFTs and just offer the service instead of waiting people to go and do it themselves. So
Yeah, I think that's super important. I know the dev team oftentimes they want everything to always be paid for in TFT and keeping it in the ecosystem and that, but I truly think that the fiat bridges are kind of the token that's going to bring us across the bridge from it being too daunting for someone to deploy a workload to someone being able to utilize the grid because and people like you and me and all that are developing solutions will be able to just make it so that they don't really have to know that they're using the grid. All they need to know is that they're getting the compute power they need and they're getting the applications delivered that they need. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Even though I do think a lot of, at least say the initial customers, let's say the group that I'm talking to are mostly people that have this feeling like we want to break free from big tech and big, so they I guess many of them would even be willing to have this little icon sitting at the left top of their new webpage saying this website runs on a decentralized internet or something, yeah, that's
yeah.
another thing I was thinking. I saw this. There was a label created something like this. This runs on Threefold or so. I mean, how long do we want to get the name Threefold attached to this new internet? Because then it becomes it almost it sounds a little bit like it's a company's or a group's thing instead of a decentralized thing. I've
Yeah.
noticed this question before, but
So I think that a lot of that comes from kind of just how it's presented. So I think a lot of people, when they think of, th the threefold grid, they think of Threefold Tech, the tech company. But Threefold Tech isn't solely responsible for the grid because only the DAO is able to make decisions by vote. So it kind of separates the two, so that the Threefold grid isn't it's controlled by the DAO, whereas Threefold Tech develops the applications that make it run in that. But ultimately, the community can set the direction of the project, or at least in the kind of the substrate documents. That's how it works.
right. So threefold is not. I mean, when we say the threefold grid, we're not supposed to see it as the what you call the threefold tech, not as the company, more as the what do you call it? What it's standing for?
Right. So the threefold grid is literally the collection of nodes and the combined compute power and the storage that's available. And the only way that that can be used is by using TFT tokens with the smart contracts. So ultimately, even Threefold Tech, the company that maintains the software right now and is the primary contributor to the grid, even though they control the software, they can't deploy a workload on the grid without paying the same amount of TFT that you and I pay.
Mhm.
So ultimately, the grid in its autonomous form kind of separates the two, whereas Threefold Tech is truly just a service provider on the grid. Their solution is the Playground and the Terraform plugin. And they provide those resources that allow people to harness the power of the grid, but they are not in control of the grid itself. Technically, there's really no way at this time that like they could decide who can and can't do something and when it can be done and on what node it can be done because it's
Mhm.
all based in the smart contract and there would have to be a decision made by the DAO to make a change to the chain.
So how did you do it? It's compute, storage, and what was the other one?
Compute, storage, and networking are kind of your three
Okay.
substrates. So
Yeah.
you've got compute
I'm
unit, storage unit, and network units.
I'm actually going to use it in the next presentation. I think it's a good explanation. When people hear threefold now, they think of, like I actually did, of the company, the organization. Um, but
Yeah, so I mean it is important because truly your threefold, what it stands for is, you've got your three substrates. You've got data, you've got compute, and you've got networking. Your
Mhm.
compute's where you store things, I'm sorry, your data is where your storage units are where you store things, your compute is what makes that data do things, and your network units are what connect it to everybody else. That is all the grid provides. Then you have to put the software layer in place that controls all of that. And the only way to do that is by creating a smart contract between your wallet and that node's twin, which draws TFT. So
Mhm.
with that being a completely autonomous process, that's how it kind of removes Threefold Tech, the developers, from control of the grid directly.
Mhm. I see our other good. What is it in your guys? It's good. Is it morning still or afternoon over there?
It is noon. It just hit noon here. I think
Yeah.
Nelson's at 1 o'clock
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me? I have no idea if I'm working or not.
I
Hmm.
can hear you. Yeah, sure. Any ducks
Okay,
left
cool.
after Christmas?
Sorry.
I said,
You
any ducks left?
What was that?
That didn't come across. I said, are there any ducks left after this Christmas?
Oh, yeah, we still got the one duck. I need to get some more.
Okay.
We need to get some people to buy some of your Pekings for
Hey,
their
I
Christmas
actually
ducks.
sold one on Christmas Eve. So that was
Nice.
Oh, cool.
Nice. Maybe seeing a little bit more pick uptick in that. I mean, we are seeing an uptick in grid usage, which means we're seeing an uptick in grid people talking about the grid. So I'm really hoping we start to see some more action for you guys on the certified node front because they really make things much easier than the DIY nodes. I mean, I've had some nightmares with my DIY nodes because it's just, building your own servers. Lots and lots of hardware compatibility issues.
Mm.
All right.
Mhm.
So what I've set up is, and I talked about this in a post a little while back, kind of having a way for people to exchange their ideas and things that they need to make their solutions on the grid work with those of us that are kind of becoming those stewards for making that happen. So I built this, and it's actually based in something that's deployable as an applet on the grid. This is Mattermost, so you can go to the playground right now and deploy this so that you're able to basically set one of these up for yourself. What I've done is I've broken it down into channels here. So you've got some projects down here for discussion of actually setting up the threefold.cloud or threefoldcloud.com domain and kind of making this a resource for people to get tutorials and things like that. And once you come into the channel for it, where you can discuss that stuff, you can come to the boards. And in here, what you'll find is actually kind of a task tracker where I've set up some stuff where kind of goals for the project. So one of the things I want to do is set up a root website for threefoldcloud.com where we can talk about solutions for hosting game servers and blockchain nodes and managing your deployed workloads underlying OS, so like Cockpit and Webmin, stuff like that. But also having solutions like direct admin and ISP config or cPanel to go ahead and have that sort of stuff. But just kind of have a way here where someone can come in and they're like, oh, okay, if I want to make an F-list of Cloud Panel, I'm offering a grant of 2,000 TFT in here, and all they have to do is send me an email. And actually, I need to add my email in there. And then, they can access that grant and, but I also want to, turn this into a resource where we can provide the tutorials needed so that people get in mind.
I still don't understand why. I guess none of us do. But and
Well,
the funny thing is that initially why not got involved, and for some reason it may actually been you talking to Christoph or so, and he got Jan and the guys from Belgium involved. And I think that's when Wijnand decided, like, okay, then I'm going to step out and just look at it from the sideline. And later, when I talked to Wijnand, it was about something else. He actually looked at it and he said, I think these guys are looking at it way too complicated. He said, keep it simple, stupid, He said, but they're technicians and somehow they just want to dig deeper and find solutions for problems that maybe don't have to be there. I don't know.
well, I can tell you the reason why yours is more complicated than mine is the ISP interfaces directly to my switch. There's nothing in between. Whereas all of the ISPs come into your data center, they likely have multiple ISP connections, and then they do switching above yours that routes everything inside the data center. So there's an extra layer of routing in the middle there.
That's weird.
And a big part of that is that mine is far easier than you would typically expect because I'm on a residential connection. So my ISP literally just plopped a gateway in my house that was fully set up and said all 4 of these ports have access to both subnets.
Mm-hmm.
So, I didn't have to do a lot of the setup you guys have had to go through.
But is that something we could have known, or is it something specific to this data center?
I'm not sure. And what I've talked with Jan, it seemed like he's been very surprised by a lot of the problems we've had. It seems like he also was of the opinion that it should have been far more simple than it has been.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if that's just, obviously, I think Green Edge is about the only other people, Green Edge and then Danny Singer, that have ever been in data center environments. So I think that's something where just as pioneering, I think we're learning that there is a little bit of difference sometimes in the way things are set up. He definitely mentioned to me he just bought a new Ubiquiti Dream Machine that he's putting in that's going to be getting his issues resolved with some of his other nodes not deploying public IP addresses. There's a lot that can go wrong in the process of deploying a public IP workload because you're getting into where each of those LAN cables plugged into the back of your node are eventually going to be, handling traffic for, up to 20, 30 IP addresses at a time per cable. So it gets very complicated. But I definitely know that we have determined that is too complicated of a process and it needs improvement.
Well, I really wanted to help Thijs and try, and actually was kind of enthusiastic because it was my chance of getting some gold, what do you call it,
Some
certified.
certified nodes, yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking of even offering the ones that I got here to the Society 4.0 group, and I'm fairly sure that they are interested in it. But I don't. And currently, I have some other ideas, and I want to keep some of my funds with me. So I was thinking of sharing this with Jan, the other guy that lives across down the street. And when I talked to him, he was just, I guess I catched him in a bad day or something. But he was like, "Oh, these freaking notes we have after all these months, they're still not working. I didn't even see any of my TFTs. I didn't." And go like, "I'm not going to spend €1 on it, until it works." I go, well, I guess all of this works against us a little bit, the exchange rate and everything. So I
Oh
told
yeah,
Ty,
and that's
I told him we couldn't do it. So
I think in as much as it is painful to have the low exchange rate and to have the low coin price, it really is representative of a healthy ecosystem because it's that way for a reason. And
sure.
it's because there's far too much capacity for no demand. And that's I'm as frustrating as it is to be where we're at in development, because I think that we could be further along. I think that in the last 6 months, we have seen a huge shift in the project,
Mhm.
towards really focusing on simplicity, really focusing towards bettering the user experience. Um, and I think that's going to make huge differences. I think things like the Mastodon applet. I'm not one of the people that thinks that we're going to see 1,000 Mastodon instances deployed in the next couple of weeks. I think it's something that will see some increase in usage, but I think what's really important about the Mastodon applet is the experience for the devs of building that applet and making it that simple and developing those processes, because basically Mastodon is a website that runs on PostGRE and Redis and just like any other website. So in building that applet, they develop tools that will allow us to port all kinds of other things, all these other web tools that are based on the same substrates. And I think that's where we really got to look, because I don't think we'll ever be able to rely on one subsector, whether that be hosting crypto stuff, hosting decentralized social media, hosting collaboration apps, that kind of stuff. We're never going to be able to rely on just one subsection of applications. But I think that the experience that the community's having, as well as that the devs are having in working together as a team to develop some of these things based on what we're seeing as popular in the world, is going to lead to those things coming just in mass, where we can, I would love to see some documentation from the devs where they just post up, this is how we made the Mastodon applet. This is how we created the code servers. This is how we coded all of this into this package so that someone else can do the same.
Is there anything, I'm just, while you're talking, I'm thinking of something else. Is there anything we can get the, let's say those crypto guys, that only come to this, that more or less come to this project just because they think it's a good mining business or minting business, whatever you want to call it. Is there anything we can think of them letting, because the funny thing is I'm also in that group, the Dutch group, and most of them, they complain and they say, the exchange rates are coming down. I'm going to switch off my node. I'm going to, and then and because there's not enough utilization. And then I asked them, I said, well, what did you do to get the utilization? Because you invested in it, but you're also in the same seat. It's our internet. So you can help yourself by trying to get the utilization. Yeah? And that's where it gets a little quiet. I said, it's like, and I give them the example. I said, it may be a bad example. I said, but you guys all together just purchased a taxi. The taxi is standing in front of the door. It costed you $50,000 or something, and it's just sitting there. Now you need customers to come over there, and because they say, well, when utilization come, I want to have extra rewards. I want to have extra this. I want to have extra that. I see you can throw as many TFTs to it if you want, but in the end, you still got a €50,000 taxi standing outside that actually goes down in value slowly. And you can have 1,000 TFT representing the €50,000. You can have 10,000 TFT representing, but every time you throw TFTs at it, basically the exchange rate goes down a little because it still represents the same 50,000 until the moment you actually get people from outside, taking the taxi and paying for it, and then the 50,000 goes up in value a little bit, and you can see it makes those guys think. So, I understand they're not. They're not going to, well, maybe they can. I don't think they're going to deploy cloud servers and all that, but maybe we can think of something they can do, and help themselves.
Yeah, so I think you've definitely seen my GEP on network farming, and that I think there's a two-sided. I have two opinions on that. The first one being that I think we should reward the people that are in that community. Their focus is how can they make their node profitable. Their idea isn't that they want to help build the decentralized internet. They want to create a business. With that, I think if you want to be in it for that reason, then you need to be in it for that reason fully, because I think just buying 100 certified, buying 100 Titans, setting them up all on shelves and plugging them all into a 200 megabit connection is not helpful. That is basic mentality of people with GPU miners and that don't provide real services. And sometimes I think that we spend way too much time trying to make it more crypto miner friendly, because ultimately I don't think you'll ever find any documentation anywhere in this project that presents us as a crypto mining project. I think the connotation with that is, that a crypto miner is a single task device. It's
Oh,
performing hashes for Bitcoin or something like that.
sure.
Um, and the same concepts don't apply at all. And I think sometimes people try to oversimplify a 3 node and call it a crypto miner, just like a GPU miner or an ASIC or something like that. Um, but I think there's a really important distinction there, because we provide real services. So I think we do need to, if someone wants to be involved in the project, and they want to be an infrastructure provider, that's the role they want to take on. They don't want to deploy workloads. They don't want to do those things. Then yeah, we need to have a reward structure that does that. But also that reward structure needs to be wholly based in providing the real services. So I think that's why we see a lot of the requirements we see in gold certified, like your redundant internet connections, your redundant power, things like that, is because realistically, it doesn't hurt us for someone that has 150 nodes sitting in a shed behind, a 20 megabit connection or a 100 megabit connection or something like that. It doesn't hurt us for those to turn off. It helps us
I feel
because,
personally attacked.
well, I
Sorry.
mean, I
I
think
didn't.
he said he feels personally attacked.
Okay.
Well,
No,
and
you're not wrong, and no one should do what I'm doing, but I'm the exception, and everyone knows that the second they're needed, they'll be in a data center in like 48 hours. So
yeah, I think there's probably a lot of farms out there right now that are a representation of capacity that may not be truly available. I think there's a lot of farms where you've got enough nodes where if someone tried to fill all of those nodes with workloads, that connection would slow to an absolute crawl. Because if you had 300 VMs running and they're all downloading stuff, that's going to take major infrastructure. But I think a big part of that is that we need to we need to have rewards for those people, but we need them to be what they're there for. We don't need to reward people we need to make sure those rewards are designed in a way that we're only rewarding things that actually benefit the grid.
But it brings me to another question, Drew. Now that you're saying it, I think I was talking to Wijnand when he was over here in the beginning, and I was led to believe that part of the whole decentralization process was also to basically get rid of most of the data centers, partly because they're owned by GAFAM mostly, and and he said even though they have their purpose, he said, but to give an estimate, I think we only need like 10% of a general data center's capacity, and that's it. How do you see that then? Because now we are saying that we to deploy stuff we actually need we need the redundancies of a data center. So are you able to say how much of our network do you think should be in a data center?
So I think data centers are a bridge. So in the final rendition of the grid, you don't need data centers. The reason we need data centers right now is because the infrastructure doesn't exist to provide, real services. So for instance, if you want to host a website, you need to use the public IPv4 infrastructure in some way of the legacy system to make that accessible to your everyday customers right now. It would not be a great experience for someone to want to go to your website to buy, a cat plushie and have to go download YGG Drazzle, set up a peer list and connect, and then go buy their plushie. So right now, the data centers are providing that bridge that allow us to have those IPs addresses on the grid that interface the two. But the ultimate concept of Threefold is to go move away from that. And the reason that happens is as the grid grows, we close in this mesh network, the planetary network. Right now, a lot of our performance and structural issues of the planetary network is because we don't have a full scope of nodes. So basically the data centers become the posts that link together our small collections of nodes right now. But as that map closes in and those nodes get closer and closer together, we start to become a more thorough mesh. And then you lose the need for the data centers because you'll have a network that's big enough to route that traffic.
and I think the answer is geographical as well. European internet is often symmetrical. Meanwhile, in America, symmetrical is rare. So a lot of American farmers will never have adequate internet at home, and would have no choice to be in a data center. Meanwhile, a lot of home connections in Europe are data center quality compared to the United States. It just depends where you are.
Yeah, and then there's definitely a big movement in American ISPs to go to symmetrical fiber in that. I know AT&T is kind of leading the charge in that. So obviously my setup's pretty rare to have like multi-gig symmetrical connections. But it is moving in that direction. With that being said, I think, ultimately the idea wasn't ever for there to be 200 nodes sitting in somebody's closets. It's supposed to be that, that there's 3 nodes in every house. So it's a distributed map. So you've only got 1 to 2 nodes per home. And then all of that cloud compute capacity builds the mesh. The idea of these giant node farms are actually not necessarily something that's really built into the idea of Threefold. It's really more of a distributed grid with that power spread evenly over the entire world.
But I think it's all relative. Even the big farmers are still small fish, right?
Oh yeah, ultimately, yes.
I am excited though that they are trenching an orange conduit down the road, and I'm pretty sure it's fiber, so things might change here.
But yeah, so I think as the grid expands, a lot of our problems will become both more complicated but also easier to solve. I think it's like our planetary network right now. We're running into a lot of growing pains there. Something that I found recently is that the Yggdrasil network is only 5,900 nodes total, like across the entire world, and we make up 2,900 of those. So I think we're currently running into growing pains where no one has ever actually pushed this network to the limits that we are. The public peer list right now, there's 31 peers in the public peer list, and each one of them is maintaining 1,650-ish connections at any given time to maintain the mesh network of the planetary network. And I think that's why we're running into trouble is, I think we were realizing that we need more peers as well. I think we're finding that even the base code of Yggdrasil hasn't ever been tested in this way, and we're learning new things about it. So. Because ultimately it is an experimental network protocol. Something we can actually, that's something I think that would be cool to show. I get some stuff pulled up here.
So with the gateways, and the networking between the gateway and the node, how dependent on Yggdrasil is that? How's the dependability and speed there?
So from my understanding, and I'm relatively sure of this, the gateways, so like when you're actually using like a gateway node to connect your PeerTube or your Mastodon through the network to another node are not planetary connections. Those go over zero network, which is actually WireGuard based. And you'll see good connectivity and speed there.
Okay.
Right now, the trouble I think we're seeing, the only trouble we're seeing with the gateways is occasionally when you boot up a node using a gateway workload, there is some delay between the workload actually being ready and the gateway's workload being ready and having built all of the connections. So we're seeing some short periods where you'll get a bad gateway error going to the web domain for a short period of time. And that may in fact be related somehow to the planetary network in between those 2 nodes talking to each other over the reliable message bus, which goes over planetary.
Okay, yeah, my next to-do list thing here is figure out how to launch not an app, but a VM behind a gateway. So that means Terraform.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you will have to use Terraform for that to be able to deploy a gateway with just like a regular VM. But there is also there's some more options to that beyond just using a gateway workload to do it. There is an F list called the forwarder F list, which allows you to forward an entire IP address to another VM running in the network. So instead of forwarding on the domain, you can deploy this F list on a gateway node or a node that's able to deploy a public IPv4, and then you can actually direct all traffic from that IP address on further into the network to a node over the ZNet.
Sounds complicated.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. It's just setting up basically a web server that's a reverse proxy to the other workload.
Oh, well, isn't that kind of what a gateway is anyways?
It is, but when you deploy it as a web gateway, it's tied to that subdomain. Whereas deploying this flist with a public IP address, you would not have to worry about the subdomain. You could actually direct like a root domain directly to this IP address.
Hmm.
So you would be the only person on that public IP, and all traffic of that public IP would go to you versus you being on a shared public IP with the other subdomain gateways.
When I SSH into a domain workload, do I actually just type in that domain and subdomain? I've never used letters on to SSH into something.
Yeah, so you can SSH by domain. It
Okay,
would
I
just
didn't
be
know
like,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was actually something that I did not know either at first. It took me a little bit to figure that out. Sometimes I feel really slow doing grid things after I realized the
Yeah.
solution was incredibly simple.
Hmm.
I spent forever trying to figure out how to use the planetary network with PuTTY because I didn't know you had to put the IPv6 address in brackets.
Yeah, those little things.
So yeah, what I wanted to show you guys is just an idea of kind of the scope of what we're doing with the planetary network, as well as why we're running into a little bit of trouble. So this is a map, an interactive map that crawls the entire Yggdrasil network and maps out the nodes and how they're connected. So what you see here is this, and this is Yggdrasil wide. So you've got the core of the network here, and what I've selected the node hash ID of Gent01 here. And this kind of shows where that node is. So if we come in, you'll see that all these green nodes, as well as some of the yellow nodes here, the green nodes are the nodes that the Gent01 sees immediately at 1 hop away. Your yellow nodes are 2 hops, and then your oranges are 3s, just expanding out on connectivity. But as you can see, you've got a lot of segregation going on here. And basically anything I would imagine in this green section is our nodes. So we're making up a major section of the network, but with that, we've also built our structure as a private subnet of the network. So there's just not really paths between the whole network and our network, and that's always been fine because we weren't big enough to become bigger than the network itself that's outside of our subnet. But I think as we've grown, now that we're coming to the point where we're equaling and at times surpassing the network's kind of halfway point, I think we're running into some serious trouble there.
Are they talking about us?
Me and Scott were just having a conversation this week about reaching out to them to let them know what we're doing. Because I don't know that there's ever been a channel open between like Neil Alexander, who's the creator of Yggdrasil, and us. And I was actually, when I pointed out the situation that I found here on the map by finding some of our node IDs on GitHub and searching them, everyone was kind of shocked to realize that we were such a large portion of this now, and that we had our growth had outgrown the growth of the network by so much. In some of our research recently going back, and Christoph mentioned this in our last community call, about being good stewards of the network. And I think a lot of what he was mentioning there is when I started really digging into this network problem, I started digging into the GitHub for Yggdrasil, and they started posting about problems about the same time we did. So it's really a question of, I think it is time that we start talking with these people and being like, hey, we're putting some serious load on your tool here. How do we do this together and make it better? Because ultimately, we now have access to 2,900 nodes that can be used in this network and structured independently and controlled to make this better. And I don't think there's anyone else in the world that could go to this organization that's building Yggdrasil and say, hey, we can provide you with the ability to control the peering of half of your network and test things and develop and improve. Dan, wanted to say hi. I saw you come in, but didn't get a chance to stop and greet you. That's pretty cool. You can actually, I'll show you, I think maybe might be over here. There's some sub networks here that are pretty cool. Where you've got actually some real life companies that use the Yggdrasil network. Yeah. So over here in this group, you can see there's actually a healthcare company in Germany that uses Yggdrasil to provide networking between as some of their infrastructure. And you'll see they have kind of set up a similar setup to ours, where they've got a chain of public peers and then a private subnet. And their subnet works just fine. Obviously the network doesn't care about a subnet of 30 to 40 nodes. But when we pull up ours here, let me go back. We'll look at go over to one of the other gents here. Go to 02. Again, it's an experimental network, so no one's ever done this before. So, it's all learning process for us, for them, for everybody. We're not buying a pre-built network solution off the shelf to build a VPN between our nodes. But if you select the root node here, you can actually see the network's got pretty good connectivity overall between the root. And even though we have attempted to build a private subnet, you can see that a lot of the nodes that we are one hop for are indeed one hop from the root. So we're definitely having some peering happening outside of the structure that was supposed to be there. Which may not even be the fault of the farmer that's causing that to happen, because the multicast peering would actually cause anyone that's running a vanilla Yggdrasil node on their network for it to automatically peer with their 3 nodes and make connections that we definitely didn't intend to be there. So I think that's a lot of why we're having to restructure things. Anybody have any other questions? Have I lost you guys?
No, still have you.
Oh, okay, cool. Got real quiet.
It's like the teacher stopping and asking.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous of your computer building. I'm waiting on some stuff to get here tomorrow. I've got a 5 gigabit connection here at the house, but I've had a ton of trouble with getting that 5 gigabits from my gateway to my nodes because it's on the 5G base T standard, which is a nightmare. And I've got some new parts coming in tomorrow that should make that happen, and I'm excited to unleash that extra speed to my gateways.
Later
Cool.
version.
Yeah, I'm also gonna. I intended to do this, and I regret it now because I walked into my office yesterday and I saw that one of my nodes now has 33 IP addresses deployed, and I was fully intending to change the gateway of that address to a root domain so that when you deploy a gateway, instead of getting like gent04.grid.tf.us or something like that, I was going to use threefold.cloud, and it would just be your name.threefold.cloud, make it a much shorter domain address. And I can't do that now because there's apparently 33 addresses already in use, and I don't know how many of those are, or I don't know how much gateway traffic there is on the node. And if I change that gateway, I think it would break everybody's workload.
Wow, 33. That's impressive.
Yeah, I was beyond shocked. I was like, oh, okay. We can let me pull up here. I'll actually show you guys kind of some of the networks. Yeah, my network has, I tell you what, it's been getting hammered in the last couple of weeks. I think I've definitely seen some major upticks in use, because I think yesterday when I looked, we were 8 days into the billing cycle, and I had already used almost 4 terabytes of bandwidth this month. Almost all of it on the gateway port that's dedicated to the farm. And then,
If people are familiar, pick you for these calls.
what was that? You broke up a bit. Oh, hey, another node.
I recognize that.
I just realized there was standing one under the table over here.
Well, now I feel like I need a node.
Well, I fully intended you to send one, but you know. I was also going to send you that Xena board, but now I'm using it as my Plex player. Sorry.
There you go. Yeah, well, we'll get a more Parker style node. There we go. That's better. Now I can have a node too. So here we'll let me screen share here. So this is my my status interface for my network here, and you can see that there is basically from here on up to here are all either gateway addresses or workload IP addresses that are deployed on the farm right now. I think there's one address in here that's not farm related. Yeah, just one. And then all these ones that are unknowns are actually workloads as well, I've found. Okay, we'll pop over to. So yeah, looking at usage stats, we've got 1.4 terabytes of upload and 2.5 of download so far since the last 11 days. So we're definitely seeing month-to-month increase. Last month in the full 29-day period, I want to say I was just over 4. And it looks like we're actually going to hit about 12 this month. Yeah. So at 4.6 last month, and we already hit that in the first 11 days. So yeah, if anyone's listening that's using my farm for this massive bandwidth stuff, I don't mind. I'm just curious. I'd love to know what you're doing.
I'm actually pirating movies through your home network. So
Yeah, I would know. So I would get a letter very quickly about that, I'm sure. I have been very closely watching for any signs of torrenting on my network, because I think if you unleash a 5 gigabit symmetrical connection on torrenting, I think that we might run into some trouble there. So
actually, on that note, deploying like a NordVPN on a node could be done behind a gateway. There's some like fancy networking stuff there possibly. Yeah,
so I mean, I think if you wanted to do that, you would be better off deploying it on a node with on a workload with a public IP. But say you wanted to install your NordVPN on a node that was at your house, but you wanted to route it through a farm that has public IPs. You could definitely do that through a gateway using either a subdomain or the forward or F list using the IP address. And that would keep the actual exchange of information happening within your network, even though it's being routed outside your network. It just forwards at that point through the gateway, so no data would be stored there.
But then it's whoever is forwarding is going to have an issue.
Theoretically, but the thing is when you're using the gateways, your traffic is going to be difficult to trace, because once it hits the node, they're going to be able to see that it's exiting the node, but not where or how, because it's encrypted. So.
Oh wait, okay, so no, this is all just hypothetical. So like, if you're going through a gateway, that's the gateway is sort of taking that traffic and then it's encrypted from there. So is that sort of in a way acting as your VPN?
Yeah, so that traffic, when it exits, it ingresses on the public interface on the public IP address, and then it egresses out the back of that node through WireGuard. So it is a VPN.
Yeah, this weird thing is I've had trouble really finding the correct terms for it for a long time. I mean, there's a VPN like any of us can just like set up easily, but then there's the VPN that people use to torrent and they purchase, and that's also called a VPN. But I really feel like they need to have separate like adjectives there because it's really hard to sometimes find what you're looking for because they're called the same thing. I know technically they are, but they're used very differently.
Yeah, so I think the big differentiator there is the idea of a VPN for a true virtual private network and a proxy service. I think a lot of people, what people call a VPN isn't necessarily a VPN, it's a proxy service.
Interesting. And that gateway is being a proxy with a VPN. So it is
Mhm.
kind of, I really wish they need different words here. I understand technically what they both are, but it's very confusing.
Yeah, that's
I use a VPN to go to work, but it's not like my Surfshark VPN.
right. So when you're logging into your work server, it's the same thing essentially as the network between ZNet. Basically what your work server does is it gives you an IP address on the local subnet of your work network. So your computer gains a new IP address when you connect to that VPN that's 192 or 10 or 174. And then now you're able to talk to local devices that are within that subnet. So essentially you're just linking your work subnet and your home subnet through a portal that is the VPN. And then that's what happens on the back end of ZNet is, we link the two nodes together. The node that doesn't have a public IP address sends an outbound packet to the node that has a public IP address and says, hey, establish a tunnel with me. It sends a return packet saying, cool, it's open. And then they both send hold open signals. And then that tunnel stays open where either node can then address either one individually with the outbound traffic. So, your node that doesn't have a public address can talk to the one with it, but your node that does have a public address can then send unsolicited traffic to the node without one because of that tunnel that exists. And that's the same concept that applies to both planetary and zero network. The difference is just that you wouldn't be able to easily configure devices to join zero network through like a desktop client, whereas Planetary has the Planetary Network client and extends beyond just the nodes and the grid itself. So really it's that zero network is the transport layer of the grid, where your Planetary is more of your network that gets information from off the grid onto the grid.
So, I mean, could this be a marketing point with the gateways that they're proxying and anonymizing your data?
Oh, absolutely. That's something where, if I deploy a workload with Gent01 as its subdomain for PeerTube, the only interface that the public can see when they access that workload is Gent01's IP address. They're not going to be able to tell where the data for that website is stored
That's
easily.
right, because no one knows where that IP address is not registered to a ISP.
Right. I mean, the IP address of Gent01 would be registered to an ISP because Threefold Tech is an ISP. But
True. Yeah, I guess so.
But so like basically what would happen theoretically is somebody starts torrenting on a server they're hosting, or they're hosting a website. They use Gent01 as the subdomain through their gateway. And if someone were to come to Threefold Tech and be like, hey, we need to see the data from this website, they would say, I can't do that. The only association there between that would be the smart contracts. We could identify what node it's deployed on, but then there's no way to access the data within that node. So yeah, it would get very complex.
I mean, this is exciting. I mean, that's worth $6 a month.
Absolutely.
Huh.
And with the forwarder F list, you can do that with with an entire IP address. So what you could set up is literally, you could deploy the forwarder F list, use that to connect you can use your home router, connect it into a proxy that hits the forwarder. And then the only IP address that anyone would ever see when you're browsing the internet is the IP address of the forwarder, and all traffic going back to you could be encrypted.
Now, why use the forwarder instead of the gateway?
because you can do the whole IP address. So like,
Oh,
basically,
I guess for some purposes, yes. I guess for like websites and stuff. But if you don't really care about having that special IP, it doesn't matter, right?
right. So it's just a difference of, like you said earlier, can you SSH into a domain? Yes, you can. It is more complicated. So if you use a forwarder F list, you get an IP address that you can just use as if it was the IP address of your server. Whereas when you use the web gateways, you get a domain address that you use as the IP address of your server.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, I'm definitely gonna spend tonight on some Terraform to see if I can get some of this test, some of this.
Well, so something I wanted to bring up too with what we're talking about here is it doesn't have to stop at a single link chain. So like I have a list here that I maintain of nodes I've tested that have working public IPs.
Very nice.
And looking at this, you've got there's another farm in Fairfax, Virginia, which I find interesting. Just an interesting location for a 3 farm to be the only other farm with public IPs. But anyways, you've got Germany, Netherlands, USA, and some Austrian servers, and then Belgium. And you think about that, I can have a workload at each one of those locations. I can make it so that when I try to access the internet, my traffic egresses my home network, hits one of those nodes, randomly chooses between the 5 others twice, and then goes out to the world. And I can do that all with workloads that I am 100% in control of and no other person can see.
Can you write that down somehow?
Sure. Let's see here. I've got a thing for that.
Sorry to interrupt, guys, but I'm gonna have to leave you tonight. So
yeah, thanks for coming, man.
Thanks very much so far, Drew, and good to see you, Nelson.
Good to see you too.
Be in touch soon. Have a good night. Have a good day.
So,
And I have the
find my ability to concentrate through complicated conversations has waned since I left school. So.
Yes. All right, let me see here. I got the whiteboard extension package for this. Now how do I use it? There we go. All right. So basically you've got, so we'll say that we deployed in Gent, Belgium. We've got our first node. Then we just deployed in Salzburg. Man, can't type. St. Gallen and Oklahoma. So with that, we can deploy an Ubuntu VM basically in each one of these locations, right? So you got and this is all just stuff that basically what you're doing is you're just adapting the compute network and storage resources, the grid through addition of software layers to perform functions, right? So then we've got we'll say this is your home network. So what you do is you take your Ubuntu deployments and you set up something like H8 proxy or NGINX, those basic solutions that are already readily available. And you connect your home network to your first one that is your load balancer or your proxy entry service. And then you basically make it so that one round robin connects out and forwards that traffic to one of these 3. And does that over ZNet so that it's encrypted. And with that traffic is then, let's say that I've deployed this one, had a public address of 162.205.240.230. And oh wow, that didn't go well. Standby. Okay. Anyways, that has an IP address. So you're gonna send your outbound packet here, and then it's gonna establish that tunnel. You would use, basically a WireGuard VPN or something like that that's running on your computer or the planetary network to connect to this workload. And then so in this scenario, we'll say you're using Planetary. So you deploy a workload here with a Planetary IP address, you connect to it, and you've got peer-to-peer connection with end-to-end encryption here. And then once it hits this server, that traffic then leaves this server on the private subnet through ZNet. So it's going to go to like a 10.10.0.1 address. So it would appear that it's going through a local network, but it's actually going to be transmitting itself from my server here in Oklahoma to either Austria, Belgium, or Germany. And then that traffic then hits the internet, so that the internet sends its traffic back to, it doesn't actually send its traffic back to you. It sends its traffic back to whichever one of these random servers asked for it, and then they know to send it back to you over the private encrypted network. Makes sense?
Yeah, that's so solid. I had no idea that was possible.
Yeah, and that's a lot of why I wanted to do these, is that I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of this is possible. I'm terrible at this whiteboard. But yeah. So with that, and you can take this to all kinds of different levels. One of the things I'm working with, bounce over to the Threefold Cloud project here. One of the things that I'm wanting to work on is an application called ISP config. So it'll be on the card over here. And what this does is it's kind of like your kind of like direct admin, but this is an open source alternative direct admin that's free. And you're able to set up all of your servers. You can run multi-server. So like I can set it up so that my name server 1 is in Austria, my name server 2 is in Belgium, and I have name server 3 and 4 in the United States. But I can then have my web interface server, my database server, and all of those in individual deployments, but it also supports the ability for mirroring those deployments for backups. And then, or even running load balance with failover, having just mirrors that you can do manual failover. And this is all in open source software. So with that, you can take the grid and you can take all of these nodes, these hundreds of nodes that are in these farms from GreenEdge and the Foundation and my farm that have, literally thousands of IPs available. And you can deploy these multinational infrastructures, building your business on top of the grid, and you only have to pay for it as you use it, and you can do it in a private, decentralized, encrypted way.
Well, okay. Let's sign on a Fortune 500 company then.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know that I would go that far yet, but
Okay.
let's fix Planetary Network first.
Or make our own better one.
That's I was doing some deep diving in the GitHubs yesterday, and I found a entry for 0 Point, which is a like an entirely experimental networking protocol that basically intends to make the internet just a series of digital switches. And I thought it's pretty cool because I often see things show up in GitHub that just lead me to believe that is definitely something we're considering. But I also think that building something dedicated when we have Yggdrasil, which has an entire team working on it and maintaining it, and they share our values, which is one of the big reasons I'm very cool with integrating their project at such a high level to us. Because ultimately the grid relies on Yggdrasil. Right now, you have to have the planetary network to create a deployment. So definitely the idea of creating something bespoke ourselves would be a huge undertaking to migrate the grid.
10 points for using bespoke in a sentence.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think I'm gonna kind of call it a shop there and get you guys back to your holiday weekend. I appreciate everybody coming.
Yeah, this is definitely worthwhile.
All right, and yeah, I'll try to get the recording up relatively soon. Thanks for coming, guys, and I hope everyone has a great day.
All right, thank you. Bye.